Some monsters do not break down your door. Some walk in smiling, holding a prayer book, and you invite them in yourself, with your own hand. In Ashwell County, a man who called himself a healer worked his way into the home of a modest farming family. For 10 years, that family told no one that they had lost one of their own blood. And that secret finally exploded, one morning, in a television studio, live, in front of millions. In this case, the audience will think, again and again, surely it can't get worse than this. And each time, they will be wrong. The Weller family had moved from the mountains of West Virginia to Ashwell County, Ohio, 20 years earlier. The family patriarch, Harold Weller, and his wife Doris, had raised 5 children, 2 sons, Caleb and Micah, 3 daughters, Judith, Naomi, and Faith. They lived in a small farmhouse, attended church regularly, and exchanged greetings with their neighbors. From the outside, they looked like an ordinary, modest rural family. The Weller family was unusually tightly bound to one another. They made decisions together and rarely spent much time apart. As a young woman, the eldest daughter, Judith, met a man named Wayne Sorrell, who introduced himself as a traveling preacher. Wayne gave sermons at church gatherings on lifting curses and casting out evil spirits. He married Judith and joined the family as a son-in-law. No one that day could have imagined how deeply this marriage would darken the family's future. The middle daughter, Naomi, had married a man named Dale Fenner and settled in a neighboring town. But that marriage grew shadowed by violence within its first years. According to later allegations, Dale physically abused Naomi. In 2007, unable to bear it any longer, Naomi returned to her family's farmhouse in Ashwell County. A woman fleeing her husband, taking refuge with her family. This was still a familiar, still an ordinary story. But when she came home, there was now someone there who hadn't been before. Her brother-in-law, Wayne. Wayne Sorrell had entered the family as a son-in-law. But within a short time, in a way no one quite noticed happening, he settled into the spiritual center of the household. He presented himself as a deliverance preacher who claimed to know entire passages of Scripture by heart. Illnesses, money troubles, even the smallest family disagreements were explained by Wayne as a generational curse or the work of an evil presence. The family's religious faith was slowly being turned into a weapon. 2 people in the family had never trusted Wayne's word from the start: his father-in-law, Harold, and Naomi's husband, Dale Fenner. Harold viewed his son-in-law's sermons with caution. Dale gave no credence at all to his brother-in-law's claims of spiritual power, and, since he had struck his own wife, disliked this man who had inserted himself into the family. Wayne knew that to establish total control over the family, he needed to eliminate both men, and he would achieve this not with his own hands, but by turning other family members into his instruments. Wayne cornered his brother-in-law, Micah, talking to him for hours, whispering fabricated claims that Dale was forcing Naomi into prostitution, staining the family's honor. The young man was crushed under the weight of days of this manipulation. In a closed family structure, where honor came before everything else, Wayne's chosen words landed exactly where he wanted them to. In 2008, Dale Fenner was shot and killed. When police arrived at the scene, family patriarch Harold Weller took the blame. "My son-in-law mistreated my daughter, so I killed him," he told the court. The judge treated it as a father's rage. Harold was sentenced to 7 years and sent to prison. From the outside, the file looked like a closed domestic tragedy, the kind of story that plays out across America every year, a father trying to protect his daughter. But according to allegations that would only surface years later, the man who shot Dale was not Harold, but his young brother-in-law Micah, whom Wayne had persuaded. Harold had taken the blame to protect his son, or, according to some later statements, Wayne had talked Harold into this lie as well. With this single move, Wayne had achieved 2 goals at once. Dale was gone, and Harold, the one authority in the family who questioned him, was locked away for 7 years. What remained was a family that answered to Wayne alone. Naomi, a woman left alone since she had no children of her own, settled back under the same roof as her mother and siblings. Over time, through instinct, she began to piece together who had really killed her husband. And that instinct placed her in a far more dangerous position than the rest of the family, because she had become the one thing Wayne feared most, someone who could talk. Once Harold was in prison, the last break on Wayne's control disappeared. First he told the family to sell their house and took the money for himself. Then he announced, "Dale's family is coming to kill you. It isn't safe to stay in the house," and moved the entire family into an old minivan. Grandmother, mother, siblings, all of them began living inside a beat-up vehicle for days, then weeks, then eventually months. They kept relocating. One night a truck stop, the next day a different county. A church member who would later testify at trial recalled that period this way. Wayne told the congregation the Weller family was under a demonic attack, and that's why they had to keep moving. No one questioned it. No one thought it was strange for a family to live in a car for months, because Wayne explained everything in religious language, and we trusted him. That statement produced a long silence in the courtroom. Even within this strange nomadic existence, Naomi continued to sense who was truly behind her husband's death. She carried a quiet, growing hatred toward Wayne, and Wayne feared that hatred would, one day, expose him. Naomi had become a source of danger now, a witness who needed to be eliminated. On a night in December 2008, Naomi Fenner disappeared. According to witness statements that would surface in the case file years later, Wayne had Naomi bound to a post inside a barn, under the pretext of driving out the evil spirit inside her. The woman was kept there for weeks, in full view of her own family, without food, without water, never allowed outside. Wayne called it a purification ritual. This was the moment the case first truly horrified its audience. A woman held in a barn for weeks, in full view of her own mother, her own siblings, and no one intervened. Years later, in her own statement, Mother Doris would say, "We thought if we touched her, it would spread to us too." That's what Wayne told us. That sentence made everyone in the courtroom tense in their seats. As a result of starvation, dehydration, and weeks of these inhumane conditions, 35-year-old Naomi Fenner died. According to statements the family would later give, her body was carried at night by Wayne and her brother Caleb to a creek at the edge of the family's land and buried there. No funeral was held, no headstone was raised, and the family carried this secret, telling no one, for exactly 10 years. After Naomi's disappearance, some family members briefly went to the prosecutor's office. Mother Doris once told police that Naomi had been killed by Wayne and buried by the creek. The prosecutor's office opened an investigation and dug on the property, but nothing was found. Within a short time, family members, under fear, changed their statements. The file was closed. This was the first of a cycle that would repeat 3 times over 10 years. In 2011, Harold Weller was released from prison, but the home he returned to was no longer what it had been. His wife and children had, by then, become entirely devoted followers of Wayne. When Harold learned his daughter Naomi was missing, he tried to go to the prosecutor, but within a short time, Harold, the one person still standing against his son-in-law, was committed to a psychiatric hospital with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. The family's last protective wall had collapsed. 7 years, 8 years, 9 years passed. Naomi Fenner's file gathered dust in the Ashwell County Prosecutor's archives. The family continued living, in a truck, in a tent, in a relative's house, constantly relocating, always under Wayne's control. And through all of it, no one managed to bring the truth behind a woman's disappearance into the light. In December 2018, Mother Doris Weller, along with her sons Caleb and Micah, appeared on a nationally broadcast missing persons program, Search America Live. They sat before the cameras and asked for help. "We are looking for our sister, who disappeared 10 years ago. We believe she was taken by the family of our late brother-in-law, Dale." At first, the audience watched this as an ordinary missing persons report, one family accusing another. But as the program continued, something extraordinary happened. The phones began to ring. Neighbors, old acquaintances, distant relatives called in live. One woman said, "Wayne used to beat his sister-in-law." Another witness cried out, "That woman is dead, they killed her." A third caller described the family living in a car for months, children scavenging bread on the street. Onto the stage, allegations dropped one after another, as if a box, sealed shut for 10 years, had suddenly been forced open. For the first time, the audience felt real horror. Could it really be this bad? Following these allegations, producers invited Wayne Sorrell and his wife Judith onto the set as well. Wayne stepped in front of the cameras with a strange calm. "I never hurt anyone, I don't know anything about this," he said. But every second on screen worked against him. Former neighbors, former congregation members, kept calling in, one after another. And finally, host Dana Whitfield received something through her earpiece. Her face turned to stone in an instant. As the program's live broadcast continued, 2 uniformed police officers walked in through the studio's back door. Millions of viewers at their breakfast tables watched a man be taken into custody in the middle of the very missing sister story he himself was telling. Wayne Sorrell was handcuffed on the grounds that he was wanted in connection with another matter. Host Dana Whitfield, trying to remain calm, said, "An arrest has just taken place on our set." The room had frozen. Wayne remained in custody for 5 days, then was released, because no concrete evidence was on hand at that moment. Within a week, with startling audacity, he appeared on the same program again. But there was no turning back now. Every day, a new witness called in, a new neighbor, a new relative. Every call pulled another brick from the wall of silence that had surrounded the family. The Ashwell County Prosecutor's Office reopened, for a third time, a file it had closed twice over the past decade. This time, it would not close again. Cornered, Wayne, live on air, described a location on the family's land. Cadaver dogs were brought in, and an excavation lasting hours began. No physical remains were found, but the witness statements and the family's own admissions gathered that day had already built sufficient legal grounds for an arrest operation. The Ashwell County Court of Common Pleas welcomed, that winter morning, the day a 10-year secret finally arrived in a courtroom. When Judge Eleanor Voss took the bench, the room was packed. The clerk read the case. The State of Ohio versus Wayne Elias Sorrell, Judith Sorrell, Doris Weller, Caleb Weller, and Micah Weller. Case number 19-CR-4482. 5 defendants stood trial. At the same time, in the same room, lead prosecutor Rosalind Cho rose. "Your Honor," she said, "this is a case where religious faith was turned into a weapon, where a family starved and dehydrated one of its own members to death over the course of weeks. Wayne Sorrell exploited this family's fears and turned them into accomplices. The other defendants looked away from this killing and, in some cases, helped carry it out." Her voice reached every corner of the room. The same attorney, Gerald Finch, rose to defend all 5 defendants. "Not guilty, Your Honor," he said briefly. One legal observer in the gallery would later recall that moment in an interview. "Right then, I thought to myself, this case is going to get overturned on appeal." With 5 defendants, whose interests differed this sharply, a single attorney representing all of them was already casting a shadow over the case's future. Emma Prescott, 52, was a woman whose property neighbored the Weller family's farmland. When she took the stand, her hands were trembling. "I'll never forget that winter," she said. "There were sounds coming from the barn, a woman's voice, not crying, more like moaning. I asked around, nobody answered. One day I asked Doris, 'Is someone in there?' She told me, 'Don't concern yourself with that. It's God's business.' And I believed her. I thought, you don't question God." Prosecutor Cho asked, "Ms. Prescott, how long did you hear these sounds?" Prescott paused for a moment. "Weeks," she said. "Then it stopped. I never heard it again." With that sentence, the room fell into a long silence. One juror closed her eyes. As one spectator would later tell a reporter, in the days that followed, "Up until that point, we thought we'd heard the worst of it. We were wrong." Finch tried, in cross-examination, "Miss Prescott, when you heard these sounds, why didn't you call 911? Prescott, unable to hold back tears, answered, "I did. I called twice. An officer came, knocked on the door. Doris said everything was fine, and the officer left. What was I supposed to do? I was just a neighbor." That answer turned the defense's own question against it. Emma Prescott, 52, was a woman whose property neighbored the Weller family's farmland. When she took the stand, her hands were trembling. "I'll never forget that winter," she said. "There were sounds coming from the barn, a woman's voice, not crying, more like moaning. I asked around, nobody answered. One day I asked Doris, 'Is someone in there?' She told me, 'Don't concern yourself with that. It's God's business.' And I believed her. I thought you don't question God." Prosecutor Cho asked, "Miss Prescott, how long did you hear these sounds?" Prescott paused for a moment. "Weeks," she said. "Then it stopped. I never heard it again." With that sentence, the room fell into a long silence. One juror closed her eyes. As one spectator would later tell a reporter, in the days that followed, "Up until that point, we thought we'd heard the worst of it. We were wrong." Finch tried, in cross-examination, "Miss Prescott, when you heard these sounds, why didn't you call 911? Prescott, unable to hold back tears, answered, "I did. I called twice. An officer came, knocked on the door. Doris said everything was fine, and the officer left. What was I supposed to do? I was just a neighbor." That answer turned the defense's own question against it. When Doris Weller took the stand, she was 64, a woman who appeared fragile. Prosecutor Cho's first question was simple. "Miss Weller, what happened to your daughter?" After a long silence, Doris began to speak in a trembling voice, about the barn, the days, Wayne saying she wouldn't come out until the evil spirit inside her was gone. "I wanted to bring her water one night," Doris said, through tears. "Wayne stopped me. He said, 'If you pity her, the curse will spread to you too.' So I stopped. I didn't bring water to my own daughter." The room fell completely silent listening to this testimony. One juror raised a hand to her mouth. This was the second time the case's audience thought, "Surely it can't get worse than this." And once again, they would be wrong, because Doris continued, "Caleb and Wayne took her away at night. I watched from the window. I heard the sound of shovels. The next morning, no one said a word. We had breakfast, as if nothing had happened." When Micah Weller took the stand, he never once raised his eyes. "I killed Dale," he said, in a flat voice. "Not my father. Wayne convinced me. He told me I had to save my sister's honor. I was 21 at the time. I believed him." The room heard, for the first time, from his own mouth, the true perpetrator of a case closed 11 years earlier. This was the case's third great twist, a father's innocence surfacing 11 years later through his son's confession. Wayne Sorrell took the stand with startling composure. "I am a healer," he said. "I tried to help people. There really was a darkness inside Naomi. Everyone in the family felt it, not just me." His voice was calm and persuasive, as though he were still delivering a sermon. Some spectators would later admit that even in this moment they could feel the man's strange, persuasive power in his voice. Cho began cross-examination. "Mr. Sorrell, your brother-in-law Micah said you persuaded him to kill Dale Fenner. Is that true?" "No," said Wayne. "And your mother-in-law Doris said you had Naomi tied to a post. Is that also a lie?" "Everyone is misunderstanding," Wayne said, his voice trembling faintly for the first time. Cho continued, "Mr. Sorrell, the full $118,000 from the sale of the family home went into your account. Is that also a misunderstanding?" Wayne could not answer that final question. There was a long silence. Judge Voss had to remind the witness to respond. Wayne finally said, "I don't know," his voice, for the first time, sounding genuinely uncertain. The room watched a man who had directed a family's entire existence for a decade come undone in the face of one simple question. Prosecutor Rosalind Cho never raised her voice in her closing argument. "This case," she said, "shows how faith can be turned into a weapon, how fear can be used to turn a family against its own member." Naomi Fenner was left without food or water for weeks, in front of her own mother, her own siblings, and not one of them could say no, because all of them were prisoners of the same fear. This is not a case about religion, This is a case about control and about murder. Gerald Finch leaned on a single argument in his closing. 4 members of this family, Doris, Judith, Caleb and Micah, are themselves victims. For 10 years, they lived under the same fear and manipulation. I ask you to see them not as willing accomplices, but as people caught in a trap. This argument planted a seed that would keep the jury from weighing all 5 defendants the same way. Judge Voss gave the jury her instructions. Weigh each defendant's responsibilities separately. Living under fear does not automatically excuse participation in a crime, but neither does it automatically prove intent. The gavel came down. The jury retired. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Finally, the foreperson rose. We find Wayne Elias Sorrell guilty, unanimously, of aggravated murder. Wayne showed no reaction. We find Doris Weller, Judith Sorrell, Caleb Weller, and Micah Weller guilty of complicity and accessory to murder. With that verdict, the room felt a relief it had been waiting a long time for. Wayne received an aggravated life sentence. The other 4 defendants received prison terms ranging from 12 to 14 years. But the story didn't end there, because defense attorney Gerald Finch appealed, and the appellate court found a procedural error. All 5 defendants, despite having clearly divergent interests, had been represented by the same attorney. This was legally unacceptable. The appellate court overturned the verdict. The case was sent back to the Ashwell County Court of Common Pleas. The trial would begin from zero. This news set off a wave of public outrage across the country. On social media, people asked, "A woman was starved for weeks, and now it all starts over because of a paperwork issue." But the legal system was required to function independent of emotion. Wayne Sorrell and the 4 family members remained in custody, awaiting a second trial. In the second trial, each defendant was assigned a separate attorney. The process lasted 14 months. Witnesses took the stand again: Emma Prescott, Grant Aldous, Doris Weller, Micah Weller. All of them told the same painful story once more. The second jury reached nearly the same result. Wayne was again found guilty of aggravated murder. The other 4 defendants were again convicted of complicity and accessory. The case was then taken to the Ohio Supreme Court, and the court issued a striking ruling. It found that the elements establishing Doris, Judith, Caleb, and Micah's active participation in the murder had not been sufficiently proven. The High Court wrote in its ruling, remaining silent, failing to report, obeying under fear, while morally reprehensible, do not, on their own, constitute the crime of aiding intentional murder. With this ruling, the 4 family members were released. This was the 5th and final moment the case horrified its audience, but this time not because of the details of a killing, but because of justice itself. A woman had been left to die over the course of weeks in front of her own family, and now the owners of those eyes were walking free. Outside the courthouse in Ashwell County, reporters asked Doris Weller, "Is your conscience at peace?" Doris said nothing and walked away. Over 10 years, the Ashwell County Sheriff's Department conducted 3 separate excavation operations. Cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, dozens of volunteers were used. But Naomi Fenner's body was never found. The creek had shifted its course over the years, the soil had settled, the seasons had passed. The court ruled that the absence of a body did not prevent the murder from being proven. The consistency of the witness testimony alone was deemed sufficient for conviction. After all the appeals had run their course, Wayne Sorrell became the case's one permanent prisoner. His aggravated life sentence was never overturned by any higher court. Prison staff say he still tries to preach to other inmates in his cell block. One guard said in an interview, "That man still believes his own story. Some people, no matter what evidence they're shown, never let go of their own lies." Doris, Judith, Caleb, and Micah live today in different corners of Ashwell County, each on their own. They rarely speak to one another anymore. Harold Weller, after his treatment at the psychiatric hospital, died a few years ago, having never found his daughter's grave. No one knows how much of the truth he ever understood, and how much he never learned at all. This case was, in the end, less about how a murder was committed than about how fear can take hold of an entire family. Wayne Sorrell needed no weapon, only faith, isolation and time. And for 10 years, a woman's cries reached a neighbor's ears but never reached the place they needed to. The system, in the end, functioned, but far too late and far too incompletely. And you who have listened to this story, may now ask yourself, how responsible is a person acting under fear? Is silence a form of complicity or simply a way of surviving? Perhaps the most unsettling part of this case is that the answer was a question even the law itself could not fully resolve. In Ashwell County, on that creek bank, there is no headstone. But every autumn, on the days the leaves fall, someone is said to quietly leave a bundle of wild flowers on that shore. No one knows who.